निवेश एक्सपर्ट टॉक सीरीज सेशन में आप सभी का स्वागत है। मेरा नाम श्रेया है और मैं आज की इवेंट की होस्ट हूँ। इवेंट पे जुड़े सभी पार्टिसिपेंट अभी केवल सेशन को सुन सकते हैं। इवेंट के दौरान आप चैट ऑप्शन पे माध्यम से अपने सवाल हमें सेंड करके पूछ सकते हैं। आज की इवेंट बहुत ही खास है क्योंकि हमारे साथ चीफ इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑफिसर आदित्य बिरला सन लाइफ एएमसी लिमिटेड से महेश पाटिल जी जुड़ चुके हैं। मैं महेश जी का स्वागत करना चाहूंगी और हमारे साथ निवेश टीम से वाइस प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ प्रोडक्ट एंड रिसर्च टीम मिस्टर आनंद शर्मा जी भी जुड़ चुके हैं, जो इस सेशन में मिस्टर महेश जी से कुछ क्वेश्चन पर चर्चा करेंगे। As rightly quoted by American investor Mr. Ray Dalio, that the first thing is you should have a strategic asset allocation mix that assume that you don't know what the future is going to hold. जी हाँ, तो आज हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं मार्केट आउटलुक एंड एसेट एलोकेशन के बारे में। आई एम श्योर आप सभी इस इन्वेस्टिंग कन्वर्सेशन को सुनने के लिए बहुत एक्साइटेड होंगे। तो वक्त जाया ना करते हुए मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी महेश जी से कि इस सेशन को आगे लेकर जाएं। ओवर टू यू महेश जी।
Yeah, thank you and good evening everyone. Welcome to this session. So जैसे बात की पहले मैं I will spend some 10-15 minutes giving the market outlook. How do we see the market right now? Where should we be investing at this point in time? What are the themes which we like? And then we can have the Q&A section. So on the markets, I think we have seen that again, there are certain kind of clouds which are there in the market, especially in the global front, right? First, it was the Russia-Ukraine crisis, okay, which led to the correction in the market. And then after that, we've seen that inflation has been a big problem, right? There has been persistent inflation, which has been running high. US inflation touched a peak of around 8.5% or so. And to bring down inflation, central banks have been going very hawkish. Hawkish means they are aggressively increasing interest rates so that the economy will slow down, and that will in turn lead to lower demand for goods and services, and that will bring down the inflation. Now, the increase in rate hikes, especially by the US, I mean, initially we were looking at around rate hikes to be around, taking the whole policy rates to around 3%, 3.5%. But in the recent times, you've seen that inflation in the US, especially while commodity prices have started to come down, but labor market is very tight, right? Job market in the US. And that is taking time to come down. So the Fed has recently become further become aggressive, and they increased policy rate by 70 basis points. And now the market is expecting that the Fed will take the policy rate to as high as around 4.5% or so, which is way higher than what we were anticipating earlier. And on that back of that, we've seen the US 10-year bond yield, which had initially spiked to around 3.3% after the Russia-Ukraine crisis, had come down, okay, to 2.7, 2.6, has again gone back now. And that is putting some concerns in terms of global growth, okay, to what extent the US economy will slow down. And it's not only US, across the world, we are seeing growth is likely to slow down. I mean, Europe is already reeling through a problem because of the energy crisis which has been there. I mean, because of shortage of gas and oil coming in from Russia, they are struggling. And we've seen that euro also has depreciated significantly in the last few months. China is also having its own challenges. Okay, they came out of COVID again. They had COVID challenges, but overall, China is now kind of having their own challenges in terms of their local economy, okay, where they're seeing the large real estate sector, which was driving the economy, is going through a pain point because of there are a lot of NPAs, okay, likely in the real estate sector. So China's economy, which used to grow at around 6.5%, 7% or so pre-COVID, is now likely to struggle to grow at around 3% or so. So across the world, there are growth challenges, and that is likely to impact the equity markets because that would imply that corporate earnings growth could also slow down. Though we haven't seen any meaningful downgrades to earnings, okay, in US and other markets, we've seen that, but not much. But the fear is that there could be earnings downgrade, and that's why there is some pressure on the market. We've seen globally markets after they had corrected, I mean, they have rallied, bounced back from the lows, okay, which they created recently around 4 months back. Again, seeing some kind of a pressure over there. India, I would say that is been a bit different over here. We have seen that our economy, since our economy we didn't do during the COVID period, there was not too much of a stimulus which was given. There was not the money which was given to the to the people, unlike in US, okay, which I mean, they spent a lot of money and give a lot of money in the hands of the consumers, okay, so that they can spend. And interest rates also had come down significantly over there. In fact, US had given a total monetary stimulus of around $6-7 trillion. We didn't do that. So our economy is slowly recovering, and there are no other challenges, okay, which we have. It's not an overheated economy, what happened in the US. So our inflation is pretty much under control. I mean, it's higher, but it's around 7.5% or so, which is not very high in the context that our target inflation, which the central banks are targeting, is around 4%. In US, their target inflation that what they have kept by the central banks is around 2%, right? And they are currently running inflation of around close to 8%. So it's way, way higher, and they need to really increase interest rate very sharply. In India, we have seen that the economy is also still improving. Slowly growth is coming back. We are still slightly below the pre-COVID trajectory of growth. But across the sectors, we are seeing improvement, whether it is the GST collections at a record high levels, the auto sector, okay, which was kind of weak, is seeing good revival in the last few quarters. We are seeing the real estate sector is also now gaining traction and seeing good sales for the last 1 year or so, and it's still steadily improving. The industrial sector, the capital goods sector, CapEx, is also starting to pick up after a long time. After almost 7 years, we've seen now private sector CapEx is showing some green shoots of improving, and that is helping the capital good companies. So across sectors, domestic at least sectors, we are seeing a decent recovery, and that is likely to help the economic growth as well as the earnings growth of companies. Again, sectors like banking also is now seeing a very strong credit growth. I mean, the credit growth in the banking sector last year was kind of in single digits, right? Kind of a mid-single digit, 6-7%. That is now tracking around 14-15% kind of a growth, which is again very strong. The banking sector is also likely is doing well. I mean, the quarterly numbers, if you see in the banks, have been fairly good. So overall, I think India is in a very strong wicket and is kind of in the whole world around where there are supply side issues, there could be very high interest rates, slow down. India is not seeing any of those challenges. It's kind of a oasis in the desert, I would say. And that is what is leading to also Indian markets have done relatively much better. I mean, we are just down probably 5% from the 4% from the all-time high, right? Which we saw, whereas a lot of other markets are down significantly from those levels. And so that is been the story in the market. And what has happened is that, I think Indian markets were also to some extent supported by the strong domestic money which is coming to the market. We've seen that last year, okay, when FIs pulled out big time, FIs withdrew almost like 37 to $38 billion from last July, August, okay, till around April, May or so. And domestic investors have been continuing to invest, which has been a big change, right? So we are no longer at the mercy of the foreign investors, which used to be the case in the past, and whenever foreigners used to sell, the market used to really collapse. That has given a good kind of positioning over there. And more recently now, FIs have also turned buyers since the last 2 months. Okay, we've seen FI flows have turned positive because I think FIs are now realizing foreign investors that India is the only market where there is likely to be growth and also long-term sustainable growth, which is there. And that's the reason why we have seen that money flow coming in. So I think if the global growth slows down and global markets correct, India will also get impacted. So you could see some correction from here. Markets are not exactly cheap at these levels. The Nifty P multiple, if you look at, is above the long-term average. On a price to book value also, it will be like around 8-10% higher than the long-term average. And so there is, I think, a fear that markets are expensive. So what do we do over here? I think India will remain expensive because of the relatively better growth outlook, I would say. But at the current levels, one need to be a bit cautious here, because the way the global sentiment is and risk capital, there could be minor correction over here. But I think India is set. I think India's time has come after a long time, is what we think, right? So it's not, I mean, India's story is not for the next 10 years, okay? Or somebody said recently, I think, I read that the McKinsey global CEO said that if India is able to really go on its path and what it is doing, okay, this could be India's not decade, right? This will India not, it will be India's century, right? So this 21st century, okay, 20 whatever, could be India's if we are able to really go ahead, okay, with the current path, okay, where we have done a lot of reforms, and with the population, with the demographics in place, we could be the one of the large economies. As you know, recently India took over UK to become the 5th largest economy in purchasing power parity. We are already the 3rd largest economy in the world. But even in nominal terms, also we could be the 3rd largest economy, okay, down the line. So I think if that happens, then obviously equity markets will do well longer term, right? And that's why we are very bullish on India as a long-term play. And I think equities as a kind of a corollary to that, if you are a play on the economy, will also do well from here. So our view remains positive on the market from a medium long-term perspective. Short term, because of the current situation globally, increasing interest rates, tightening liquidity, you could see some kind of a correction or markets consolidating for some time. And that's how I think we would see. We don't see, we think the markets are in an uptrend. I think the bottom, what we saw in the early part of this year, okay, because after the Russia-Ukraine crisis, I think that should hold on. And I think markets will continue to scale higher. Though the return expectations will be clearly out to tone down from here. Though, because the valuations on our starting point is not exactly at a lower point. We are starting at a slightly higher point in the valuation. So that is something which you should keep in mind. In this context, I think if investors want to invest, I think the best way is to continue the SIPs. Don't do lump sum over here, because it's not a market where you would. It's not like the markets won't see a correction from here. They could be, but be prepared for that. So SIP, I think one should continue to do that. Across within equities also, I think large cap, mid cap, small cap, I think the risk reward is fairly well balanced, I would say. We think that small cap and mid caps, while there could be near-term pressure if there is a correction, but over a next 3-year time frame, mid cap and small cap can do well, because a lot of the mid cap and small cap are focused on the domestic economy, and domestic economy is likely to do well. So a lot of sectors which are there relatively, and if you look at the small cap, is still way below the earlier peak, all-time peak is there. So that could do well, though one would not advise to go aggressive there in the mid cap and small cap sector, because current valuations are still, they are also fair over there. And near term, if at all there are whatever global risk, I mean, there could be more volatility in the small cap and mid cap space. But otherwise, maintain a target asset allocation, I would say. Both. We have been recommending that within equity, we should have around 25-30% in large cap, 35-40% into multi-cap, around 20% into mid and small cap, and around 10-15% into thematics. Some of the themes which we like are mainly focused on the domestic theme only. So we like the banking and financial services sector. I think that has started to do well now. We've seen that the whole NPA cycle is behind us. NIMs are slightly improving, and credit growth is coming back. So that sector looks well, and that's why we've been recommending our banking and financial services part as a thematic. We think even in India, the consumption story will continue to be a good long-term story, especially discretionary consumption and low-ticket discretionary sectors like retail, building materials, then consumer durables, right? Um, so, so all these sectors, I think, will continue to grow because of lower penetration in India. Per capita income is also now crossing around close to $3,000, just short of that. And that's the time when we see a hockey stick for a lot of the discretionary consumption items which is likely to be there. So that remains again a long-term story which we like, and we've seen consumption is slowly starting to pick up. Even rural India, which was under distress last year because of the second wave of COVID, is now recovering, and with grain prices now being fairly good, they should rural economy should also pick up. So I think these are the two broad themes which we like, and one can play that on the thematic side to fund like consumption fund. Apart from that, I think the whole industrial manufacturing, the focus on domestic manufacturing under the Modi government is now gaining traction. We've seen the PLI scheme, which the government had instituted, which is the production linked incentive scheme, is gaining traction, which is promoting manufacturing locally, and not only for the domestic market, but also for the export market. So that is also now gaining traction across sector: textiles, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, consumer durables, electronics, and auto ancillaries. We've seen that picking up. The capital goods sector also is now seeing some green shoots over there. The capex recovery, as I mentioned, is happening after a long time. So that sector also looks good for us. Real estate is also picking up. So all sectors leading to real estate, like building materials, cement, should do reasonably well. And amongst the other sectors, niche sectors like chemicals, for example, specialty chemicals, India has seen benefit because of China plus one policy coming in. So globally, companies are looking to diversify from China, and more so after COVID. And that is benefiting sectors like chemicals, textiles, right, which Indian companies should be able to take advantage of. So that's some of the themes, okay, which we like and we think will do well over the next few years. So with that, I'll just pause here now. I think there are a lot of other questions which could be there, and we can take that in the Q&A section.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Patil, for sharing your views about the economies and the market outlook. So basically, as there's a great expectation, there's a huge expectation from the market that we may see in the coming quarters. We may see कि भाई developed nations जो हैं हम लोगों के economies जो हैं वो they may go into recession in coming quarters. So आपको क्या लगता है, what's the impact of it is going to be on our domestic economy?
Yeah, so सही बात है कि I mean, there are talks that US will get into recession because इतने interest rate बढ़ाओगे तो economy को shock तो मिलेगा, right? I mean, they have a mortgage rate used to be like 2%, have gone to around 4.5%, 5% or so, and so there will be kind of probably in the next 3 quarters, okay, you could see that impacting over there. So the question is whether it's a long-run recession or a mild recession, right? In the sense it lasts for a couple of quarters, because what will happen is the central banks are not going, they are also working there, right? So as the economy slows down and inflation comes, they'll also start reversing that tightening policy, and you could see policy cuts down the line. So I don't think it will be a long-run recession, okay? That way the central banks are very now nimble, and they are watching it closely. It will be a mild recession. In that scenario, I think it will impact a few Indian companies, exporters, or companies which are linked to global growth. They'll get impacted. India is not so much Indian companies. The Indian economy is more driven by domestic growth, right?
Yes.
It's not so much dependent on external things. There are a few sectors, but not to a large extent. So, and what will happen is that because of global growth slowing down and demand slowing down, commodity inflation, okay, which was running very high, right? Post even Russia-Ukraine crisis has started to come off now. So oil prices have come down from 130 to around $90. Steel prices are down by around 25-30%. Aluminum prices are also down by around 25-30%. We've seen food prices also, okay, which had gone up, are starting to come off. And India is a large importer of commodity, net importer of commodity.
Yes.
So that should help the domestic economy, and companies also which were reeling under the pressure of high commodity prices and margins were getting impacted, and that should benefit. So, so I think India should still be able. There'll be some mild impact in terms of growth within the external sectors, but the falling commodity prices will benefit our economy to that extent. And we don't see any major impact on our growth. Like we were expecting a GDP growth of around 6.5%. I think it will be marginally lower, not significantly lower from that, is what our view would be.
Okay, so given the current scenario of the market and the economies, what strategy our partners should recommend to our investment strategy? हमारे partner क्या strategy अपने investors को recommend करें आजकल की market scenarios को देखते हुए या economy के dynamics को देखते हुए long term horizon के point of view से?
तो मैं बोलूँगा कि for the partners, again, long term outlook अच्छा है. India, I think you have to be in the markets. अगर आपको wealth create करनी है, तो equity is the asset class which will give you much higher return than inflation, right? So which we have seen in the past. Question is यहाँ से भी market कितना return देगा, because market expensive है थोड़ा सा, चला भी है, and there are risks over here. So keeping that in mind, I would say that you need to have a very balanced approach in your portfolio, right? आपका जो टारगेट एसेट एलोकेशन है, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल एक इन्वेस्टर के रिस्क प्रोफाइल से आपने अगर चूज किया है कि उसका टारगेट एसेट एलोकेशन होना चाहिए 60% इक्विटी होना चाहिए, राइट, से 30-40% डेट और बैलेंस इन गोल्ड और व्हाटएवर. So now looking at the risk reward, I think is well balanced. I mean, equity का return देखोगे, even debt also rates are now gone up and they are likely to go up, right, in the next 3 to 6 months over here. So the debt में जहाँ पे एक साल पहले everything people were, debt returns were very, very low. I mean, your FDs were giving some 5%, their liquid funds were giving also kind of a 4% kind of a return. And people started to move everything into equities, and equities were giving good returns last year. Now, equities are giving on a risk-adjusted basis, they are normal returns, right? What they give on a historical basis. We don't expect extraordinary from here. Debt is also like the so. आपका जो allocation it should be near to your target allocation. आपको excesses नहीं करनी चाहिए यहाँ से. And follow the discipline and any continue with the SIP, as I said, because that's the best. Because you don't know कि market पे correction आने की उम्मीद है, but correction कितना आएगा, कहाँ से bounce होगा, उसके लिए अगर wait करोगे आप, right, यहाँ से market correct होगा तभी मैं invest करूँगा, तो you will miss the bus. And that's what happened, right? Last time also people market correct, all correct होगा, and the market continued to move up and climb the wall of worry. तो उसके लिए आपको वेट करने की जरूरत नहीं, तो आपको जो रेगुलर इन्वेस्टमेंट है वो तो एसआईपी आप करते रहना चाहिए. एंड आई थिंक या जस्ट फॉलो, डोंट गो ओवरबोर्ड, राइट, एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम, राइट, बिकॉज द रिस्क रिवॉर्ड इज वेल बैलेंस्ड आई थिंक अक्रॉस एसेट क्लास. बट लॉन्ग टर्म का पैसा अगर है तो आपको इक्विटी के लिए ही ज़्यादा, जितना ज़्यादा कर सकते हैं, आई थिंक यू शुड डू दैट. हाँ, जो आपको पैसा 1-2 साल के लिए इन्वेस्ट करना है, उसके लिए आई वुड नॉट रेकमेंड टू गो अग्रेसिव इक्विटी, बिकॉज देयर आई थिंक नेक्स्ट 1 year आई डोंट नो द रिटर्न्स might not be all that great from here, right? Risk reward is not looking all that great.
Okay.
Side भी है, downside भी थोड़ी है, तो वो आपको जो चाहिए पैसा for next 1 or 2, that I think you should keep it safe, right? Say into a debt fund or even within equity also choose a less riskier product. Like जैसे कि बैलेंस एडवांटेज फंड है, जहाँ पे इट्स अ मोर बैलेंस बिटवीन डेट एंड इक्विटी, एंड दी इक्विटी का एलोकेशन इज डिपेंडेंट ऑन दी मार्केट का कितना वैल्यूएशन है, उसके हिसाब से चेंज होता रहता है, और एसेट एलोकेशन फंड होता है, राइट. तो वहाँ पे आप उसको निवेश कर सकते हो.
ओके, सो गाइस, जैसे कि मिस्टर पाटिल ने बताया है कि अगर हमें लॉन्ग टर्म के हिसाब से इन्वेस्टमेंट करनी है, देन इक्विटीज इज अ बेस्ट एसेट क्लास. और इक्विटी में भी करंट मार्केट सिनेरियो को देखते हुए एसआईपी और स्टैगर्ड मैनर में इन्वेस्टमेंट करें तो ज्यादा बेटर है. और उसके लिए अगर एसआईपी भी नहीं तो फिर इन्वेस्टमेंट लमसम लेके डेट फंड में किसी भी शॉर्टर एंड ऑफ द कर्व पे, वहां से हम एसटीपी लगा सकते हैं. राइट मिस्टर पाटिल? STP may be also the good option for long-term investment.
I think STP is also a good option. It is spread out, say, over the next 6 months or whatever.
बिल्कुल. और गाइस, अगर शॉर्ट टर्म का होराइजन है तो इनका मेन यही आउटलुक है कि डेट में इन्वेस्टमेंट मैक्सिमम रखी जाए. एंड तो जैसे अभी हमने मिस्टर पाटिल बात करी एसेट एलोकेशन के बारे में, तो आपने जैसे विद इन डिफरेंट कैटेगरीज ऑफ इक्विटी में एसेट एलोकेशन की बात करी, अभी आपने ओवरऑल भी थोड़ा बहुत डिस्कस करा, तो उसकी इंपॉर्टेंस थोड़ी सी अगर आप थोड़ा सा हाईलाइट कर पाए कि भाई व्हाई एवरीवन नीड्स एसेट एलोकेशन. क्योंकि ये एसेट एलोकेशन रीबैलेंसिंग वगैरह शुरू में तो सब इन्वेस्टर्स भी बोलते हैं, मगर वो कहीं ना कहीं मिस आउट हो जाता है रीबैलेंसिंग. तो वो रीबैलेंसिंग का अगर आप थोड़ा सा हमें पार्टनर्स को इस पे मार्गदर्शक कर पाए तो प्लीज.
तो अगर हम asset allocation बात है तो कौन से asset class है? मेन एक तो equity, we know, right? We know debt or fixed income जैसे बात की, right? We know gold, okay, is also a kind
Yes.
of asset class, okay, and then अभी commodities करके, commodities also, but it's a very small, we won't really talk.
Mainly
much about
broadly
it.
तो वो चार ही हैं, equity, debt, fixed in, equity,
Gold.
debt and gold.
And then
तीन ही हैं.
बाकी तो real estate is a physical asset class, so we'll keep it
Yes.
out from that, okay?
Alternatives.
Yeah. So आपने देखा है कि हर एक asset class की long term return अपने को मालूम है, right? But they behave in different phases and different cycles होती है, and they are not necessarily correlated. I mean, जब equity is अच्छी करी, तभी debt probably will not do well. When equities don't do well, debt will give you support over there. Gold also is slightly uncorrelated. I mean, normally when there is a lot of risk averseness which is there or high inflation, normally gold does well over there. So that also works a bit differently. Now, when you do an asset allocation, तो क्या होता है कि आपका overall returns, okay, on a blended basis will slightly be lower than the best asset class, right? Equity से तो कम होगी, because but what it does is that on a blended basis, if you look at it, because of the diversification which you have, तो आपकी जो volatility है, right, वो कम हो जाती है, right? On a risk-adjusted basis, they देखते हो, right? Then the returns look much better over there. And normally, typically, investors, what happens is that typically by nature, investors are risk averse. I mean, they want to get higher returns, but they also are very nervous, okay, when there is a large drawdown or negative returns, right? Large negative returns. Okay. So asset allocation allows you to cushion that fall, okay, in that period. Normally, equities are more volatile, right? And that can, equities can give a negative return. We have seen -20, -30, -40, -50% return also at some point in time. So by proper asset allocation, okay, you automatically that it cushions that fall to some extent. Also, क्या होता है कि जब भी कोई asset class में return बहुत ज़्यादा होती है, then the risk also increases because there is a mean reversion of return. See, finally, the returns mean revert to the long-term average. Now, equity की long-term average returns है around 13%, right? 12-13%. So suppose the equities give you a very high return in a particular year, around 30-40%. You've seen that एक साल में कभी होता है, then they'll mean revert again to the long-term return, right? So वो टाइम पे if you follow strict asset discipline, तो अगर आपके पोर्टफोलियो में अगर टारगेट एलोकेशन इक्विटी का 60% था, 60 would have gone to around say 70-75% or so. Then you try to book that at that higher level and bring it down back over here.
So rebalancing is very much important.
Yeah, when the market's correct, you already pocketed that gain at that higher level automatically, and you don't have that much of an impact over here. Similarly, when the returns are low in a particular asset class or underperforms big time, negative returns, your allocation there goes down, and you tend to buy them naturally at a lower level, right? When it is more attractive. So normally, क्या होता है कि market पे जब भी equity market में, when the markets go down, everyone is fearful, or you don't want to invest. मालूम है हमें कि तभी market is more attractive, but there are a lot of negative sentiments are there, right? There are a lot of negative news, and you don't know if the market will still go down and you don't want to invest. But with asset allocation and discipline, automatically you will tend to rebalance it, okay, and buy it at a lower level. And that will, over a cycle, will give you returns which are on a risk-adjusted basis much better. So I think that is the basic purpose.
जो investors अगर खुद rebalancing नहीं कर सकते, then balance advantage or dual advantage funds are the best option.
और अभी तो market में asset allocation fund भी आ गए हैं, right? Which are across asset classes, okay, which will do the rebalancing.
बिल्कुल.
And they are there for different risk profiles. So you can choose those funds.
Okay, that's good. So आपके हिसाब से इक्विटी में जैसे आपने एसेट एलोकेशन हमें लार्ज कैप, मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप का बताया, तो कौन सी कैटेगरी फर्स्ट प्रेफर्ड होनी चाहिए? एक फ्लेक्सी कैप हो में इन्वेस्टमेंट पहले कराएं, कोई फ्रेश इन्वेस्टर अगर आ रहा है उसका, या फिर उसको लार्ज कैप देना सही है, या मिड एंड स्मॉल कैप में डिफरेंट कैटेगरी ऑफ इन्वेस्टर को लेके जाना चाहिए? वो सब एक बार हम आपसे समझ रहे थे, कौन सी कैटेगरी को प्रेफरेंस फर्स्ट डे?
I think first we should give for a first-time investor, give a diversified fund, right? Which is either a flexi cap fund, okay, which is diversified across large, mid, and small. I would say that should be there, or a large cap fund, right? Okay. I mean, within the large cap also, because these are more companies which are well established, much more stable, right? You would see relatively less kind of drawdown, because जो पहला इन्वेस्टर आता है उसको अगर चोट लगती है, right, the market खराब हो गया नहीं, then he gets out of the market, right?
बिल्कुल.
So probably a large cap fund or a flexi cap fund at best is what I think one should be looking at. Or one can even give a balanced advantage fund also, right?
Okay.
Okay, especially if he is very, very risk averse, I just want to come in, okay, and then he's worried about the volatility, you can also look at a balanced advantage fund, no, or a balanced fund, no, okay, for a first-time investor.
So,
And then as he progresses and you want to add more to equity, then one can move down the curve, okay, to get him towards a mid-cap fund or a small-cap fund or a thematic fund to, yeah, right? So it's team of that, but that will be as he matures and has
once he become an experienced investor,
and he's got more to allocate, right?
हाँ.
His equity exposure, I think one can then move down the risk curve over there.
Sure. So, Mr. Patil, जैसे कि आपने बताया कि भाई फ्यूचर आउटलुक डोमेस्टिक इकोनॉमी का, हमारी कंट्री का बहुत अच्छा है, मगर अभी करंट मार्केट अगर हम वॉलेटिलिटी की बात करें तो बहुत ज्यादा हाई रहती है. अभी हमने 2 दिन पहले भी देखा है मार्केट में एक ऑल ऑफ अ सडन वी शेप रिकवरी आई, ओपनिंग बहुत लो हुई, उसके बाद रिकवरी हुई. तो क्या हमारे पार्टनर्स को, हमारे इन्वेस्टर्स को इस तरीके के डिप्स में एसआईपी अगर चल रही है तो वो समहाउ डिप्स पे इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ा देना चाहिए, इस तरीके का रिकमेंडेशन रखें, या फिर एक कांस्टेंट एसआईपी चलाएं? मतलब इन द सेंस कि जब भी मार्केट गिरे तो इन्वेस्टर्स को ये सलाह दें कि एसआईपी अमाउंट बढ़ा दें फॉर दैट मंथ पर्टिकुलरली, या फिर हम लोग वही जो अमाउंट चल रहा है उसी तरीके से उसको मेंटेन रखें?
See, I think, I mean, to do that, I think, yeah, if you are a really a smart investor, I think if you try to have and further, I mean, normal SIP को अगर थोड़ा सा आप इसको और modify करते हैं, and try to say कि you calibrate and say, fine, when the markets go down, okay, when it becomes more attractive based on a certain parameter, you increase that SIP, okay, or above a particular level, if the market goes up, you reduce the SIP. That can also be a good approach. It complicates the matter, but for a normal investor, I think if you continue SIP, that is also good enough. I mean, it's not complicated करने की जरूरत नहीं है, but
okay,
if somebody wants to do that, right? Okay, one can still look at that, but I don't think it will really make any money. We have tried to run that model. ज़्यादा इतना फर्क नहीं गिरता है returns में.
Okay,
it can improve returns by a few, whatever, 30-40 basis points, but it complicates things a bit more. तो इससे ज़्यादा कुछ फायदा नहीं होगा, थोड़ा फायदा हो सकता है.
okay,
अगर सिंपल एसआईपी करोगे, that itself is, I think,
that's a better option कि
yes,
जो चल रहा है उसी को चलाते रहें या फ्रेश शुरू कर दें मैक्सिमम.
yes.
So अगर जैसे आपने बताया बैंकिंग सेक्टर अकॉर्डिंग टू यू इज वन ऑफ द बेस्ट सेक्टर गोइंग टू बी एंड इज डूइंग फैंटास्टिकली वेल एज वेल. करंटली अगर हम देखें तो मार्केट में बैंकिंग बहुत अच्छी तरीके से परफॉर्म कर रहा है. अब तो अगर हम पूरे डिके के बारे में बात करें, नेक्स्ट 10 साल के बारे में बात करें, सो डू यू थिंक कि भी बैंकिंग या कोई और सेक्टर आपको लगता है कि भाई कोई और सेक्टर बैंकिंग की जगह ले सकता है, या फिर किसी और सेक्टर में इन्वेस्टमेंट करना चाहिए फ्रॉम द डाइवर्सिफिकेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, थीमेटिक फंड्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से?
Yeah, so I think thematics में क्या होता है कि there are sector funds and thematic funds, right? So thematic sector funds normally cycle रहते थोड़ा कि they will do well, like we had last 2-3 years, we had IT sector did very well, with normal returns. Now it is seeing some kind of the same pressure points, okay, because the cycle with US going down, okay, that's not doing well. Banking didn't do well, okay, now banking is looking well. So, so I think some of the thematic fund you have to also understand, right? कि cycle कितना time हो रहा है जिससे आप देख रहे हो उसको. Normally banking is still a sector which we have seen which is based on the core economy. Across the cycle लोगे तो ठीक ठाक ही return देगा, just better, right? So if you buy there at the right time, probably when it's more attractive valuation wise or at the bottom of the cycle, तो आपको ज़्यादा return मिलेंगे वहाँ से. We think it is poised for that, but otherwise also it can, over a market cycle, we see banking and financial services has done well, at least in a country like India. But फिर भी I think if you really want to look at a thematic fund from a very long term perspective, then you look at a broader theme थोड़ा. तो वहाँ हमें एक broad theme देखनी चाहिए. तो वहाँ पे हमें we have been always recommended India is a consumption story. India is a consumption market, right? Of our GDP, if you look at 50% is still consumption, and it's a growing economy, right? Where per capita incomes are going up, आपकी demographics are in your favor, right? Your new generation is also consume. आपका premiumization हो रहा है, right? A lot of incomes go up. आपको you go in for premium products which is there. So I think that will continue to drive consumption for a long time.
So manufacturing and infrastructure आप कहना चाह रहे हैं?
No, not manufacturing, consumption की बात करो लोग.
Consumption, okay.
Like consumption will include आपके all kind of consumption which we do, whether it is the consumer sector, typical FMCG sector, consumer discretionary, उसमें
Yep.
auto आ गए हैं, consumer durables हो गए हैं, retail sector हो गए हैं, the spending what you do on entertainment, right? That will be there. So it's all those kind of बाहर खाते hotel restaurants में, okay, that is also sector which is part of that. So like we have a fund called Gen Next Fund, which is focused on that, where the Gen Z, the new generation, is spending, and that's the fund we think has got a long-term effect. It's done better than some of the diversified funds also, and with lower volatility, and that can be a thematic fund. That's the best thing to invest for the next 10 years or 20 years also, I would think.
Okay. Thank you. So my last question to you is, however, it may be tough, but when do you think कि भाई Fed का या RBI का हमारी तरफ से इंटरेस्ट रेट हाइक्स पीक आउट हो जाएंगे? क्या लगता है, मतलब जिस हिसाब से, क्योंकि डेट काफी प्रेशर में चल रहे हैं, ये तो JP Morgan का जो इंडेक्स में इंक्लूजन की वजह से बोल रहे हैं, या इन्फ्लेशन थोड़ा सा कूल ऑफ हुआ था तो थोड़ा सा इसको सपोर्ट हमें लगता है मिल गया, मगर फिर भी एक रेट हाइक का कंसर्न बना हुआ है अक्रॉस द ग्लोब और डोमेस्टिकली। तो ये कब तक हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि भाई 3 महीना 6 महीना, या कब तक पिक आउट होने की आपको लगता है कि भाई ये जो है पिक आउट हो जाएंगे एंड थिंग्स आर गोइंग टू बी न्यूट्रलाइज्ड फ्रॉम देयर?
तो आई थिंक पॉलिसी रेट्स पहले लग रहा था कि यूएस में ना, ओके, इट विल काइंड ऑफ पीक आउट बाय फर्स्ट क्वार्टर ऑफ नेक्स्ट calendar year, right? And then probably you could see rate cuts mid of next calendar year, right? But अभी थोड़ा defer हो गया है, okay, because there can be more rate hikes over there. So I think the cycle will probably continue for the next, say, another 9 months or so, no?
Oh, okay.
So we have already seen that play out, okay? So probably somewhere in mid of next year is where I think, or probably slightly March of next year, calendar year, okay, it could peak out. Like for example, US, the policy rates could peak out at around 4.5%, right? In India, we are looking at policy rate will peak out at around 6.5%. Currently, I think the policy rate is around 5.25% or so, right?
Okay.
So another probably or 6.25%, so another 100 basis point, no? Policy rate could go up in India. So yeah, so in the next 6 to 9 months, 6 months, I think it should kind of peak out.
So इस महीने जैसे दोनों की पॉलिसी आनी है, आरबीआई ने भी अनाउंसमेंट करना है, फेड से भी हमें आना है, तो इस नियर बाय में आप कितना हाइक एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं? हाइक तो होना है, ये तो मार्केट में।
या सो आई थिंक यूएस में अभी प्रोबेबिलिटी 70 बेसिस पॉइंट की है, और जिस तरह से अभी इन्फ्लेशन की प्रिंट आई थी 2 दिन पहले, राइट? तो some people are talking about even a 100 basis point hike, right? So there is a 40% probability of that also. Because थोड़ा सा upfront करेंगे to really give a shock that inflation starts to come in faster.
Okay.
India में इतनी जरूरत नहीं, because India inflation is still okay, right? As I said, so you would probably see a lower increase. It could be probably a 50 basis point rate hike, which could be there.
So according to this scenario, we should still continue with the recommendation of shorter end of the curve, maintenance of that.
Yeah, so I think rather than shorter end, आपको क्या match करनी चाहिए आपको, no? Your investment fund which you choose and investment horizon they should be matching. So आपको you don't get a impact because of rate increase से आपको जो capital होगा ना. So that's what I think you should try to match with that, and that will give you a decent return. So you capture the total carry जो होगा, right? Whether it is there. Like for example, अभी जो हम लोगों ने lot of market में आया है जो target maturity plans fixed income में आया, right? It's like a kind of FMP जैसे थे, but it's open ended, right? So which are like the different time periods. You can look at 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, okay, which gives you the reasonable returns, say about 7% or so, no?
Okay,
right? So yeah, so I think you should match your investment horizon, okay, with the fund. I think that will then give, because the return now across the spectrum is now fairly good. I think the best risk reward probably I think is there in the medium this thing, like a 1 year, 2 year period, no?
Okay,
and which is offering the best kind of risk reward.
Okay. So according to the tenure, we need to decide about the debt category.
Yeah, आपका investment horizon क्या है उसके साथ.
Okay.
Match that, na, fund according to that. But otherwise, I think once you look at the shorter end of the curve, no? Yeah, I think that's what.
So universally, the shorter end of the curve you prefer. However, it depends upon the tenure of the investors.
Yeah.
Where to invest, how much long they want to invest. Okay.
Right.
थैंक यू। सो मेरी तरफ से इतना ही था मिस्टर पाटिल। सो श्रेया, हम लोग क्वेरीज ले सकते हैं इन्वेस्टर्स की?
Yes, sir.
सो
Thank
इज देयर एनी क्वेरी?
Thank you, Mr. Patil ji. Thank you, Mr. Anand sir. I request all the participants, if you have any question, you can ask. Mr. Anand Sharma will be discussing with them. I request if you have any question, you can ask through the chat box. Mr. Anand Sharma will be discussing them. So there is one question: what's the view on IT sector since it's down right now?
So the IT sector, I mean, has currently reacted, underperformed because of concerns about US growth going down. Because IT sector is exporting to US, Europe, और दोनों जगह पे problem है growth की because of the higher interest rate and the tightening which is there. Now, the IT sector still, I think the overall demand pipeline or order book अभी भी अच्छी है if you talk to the companies. But there's a fear that okay, next year we could see some kind of the growth. Currently, IT sector is growing at around 14-15%. That would slow down, okay, in single-digit growth is what the market is fearing. I think the move toward digital economy globally, I think that has to continue for a longer period of time. And people will have to invest despite slowing down because this is more to grow your business. Pehle IT spend is more towards sustaining the business. Right? Because you have to just do automation to some extent to sustain. And now it is more for growth because you have to do IT at the front end too. If you want to really be competitive in the market, after आपकी sales turnover growth है, आपका IT spend करना पड़ेगा to acquire customers or to get a better experience to the customer. That is not going to slow down to that extent what we saw in the earlier cycle. So IT sector थोड़ी multiple re-rating हो रही है अभी because of that, because multiple also got re-rated in the last 2 years post-COVID because of the strong growth. So that is what is happening. Otherwise, वहाँ पे इतनी ज़्यादा tension नहीं है. I mean, growth rate थोड़ी नरम होगी, but companies are good. They are generating good cash flows. वहाँ पे dividend payout भी अच्छा है, buybacks भी कर रहे हैं. So while it might still underperform a bit because domestic sector will do relatively better, but fundamentally, I don't see any problem in the IT sector. Right? We are currently mildly negative, okay, underweight because relatively we find other sectors will do well like banking and this thing. But in absolute term, I don't see IT sector should have much of a problem over here. No? It will continue to be a more steady kind of a growth, though at a lower rate than what it has done in the past.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, what about Flexi Cap Fund, sir?
So Flexi Cap Fund, as I said, is looking good because all the risk reward across large cap, mid cap, and small cap, I think is well balanced over here. So bottom up picking, say, agar we look at that fund, okay, then I think that will be ideal fund to look at this point in time, right, for any investor. And you can play across the spectrum because अभी market में you have to pick opportunity of value कहाँ पे है, and there is value with large cap भी है, mid cap भी है, small cap में भी है, right? So Flexi Cap will be able to do that, I think, much better, I would say, at this point in time. So I would recommend that maximum allocation should be towards the Flexi Cap fund.
So next question, Mr. Patil, is about the textile and pharma sector. Audience wants to know about कि भाई इनका outlook कैसा रहेगा pharma sector का या textile sector का?
So pharma sector थोड़ा underperform किया है, okay. हाँ. During COVID, it did very well. Okay, it bounced back, but in the last 9 months, this year it is underperformed. The pharma sector, there are two parts. One is domestic pharma companies which are catered to domestic market, and there are export oriented which cater to the US, Europe, and other markets, right? So I think जो export oriented companies हैं, ज़्यादा वहाँ पे थोड़ा pressure है because pricing pressure is there. Generics market में US में काफी pricing pressure है, तो वहाँ पे growth is also a challenge, and so they might still not do well. I mean, और वहाँ पे unless companies are continuously come with new products, right, invest into R&D, they will struggle over there. But domestic pharma should be steady, right? Domestic industry, because of so much focus on healthcare, and we see a steady growth of around 10 to 12%, right? It's like a consumer steady sector. And domestic में क्या है कि अच्छी बात है कि companies के returns भी अच्छे रहते हैं. The return on capital is good on domestic market. Profitability अच्छी है. So domestic pharma should be more steady and a safer sector, a defensive sector of this group, then it is good. It might not be very high returns, right? But it will be a more steady return over there. That's on the pharma sector, I would say. Or healthcare sector, you could take healthcare also, which is like hospital, diagnostic. I think that is also good and steady. In India, there's a lot of under-penetrated market, which is the unorganized market, which the organized players can continue to do and do. So that healthcare space looks good, okay? Not just look at pharma alone. Textile sector has seen some kind of a challenge because of cotton prices have gone up. So there is a problem in cotton prices, but now that is kind of normalizing. Textile may do integrated players there. They should do well. There is an opportunity for exports, right? Because of disruptions, okay, which are there from China. Bangladesh is also, which is a large player textile market, has facing some challenge because of energy. So India can actually capture that opportunity, right? And do well. So textile also looks fairly good, but companies which are slightly more integrated, right? And be able to withstand the increase in some of the raw material prices, okay, which will impact your margin further. Yeah.
So next question is, how do we construct our core portfolio, so that it completes the financial plan through mutual funds itself? So asset allocation, I think, is the best way on a broader level, and then they can select these schemes. Am I right?
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I explained, right?
Yep.
Asset allocation karo pehla, okay, risk profile ke hisab se, don't go overboard, aggressive in this market because risk is very high. Within that, then you choose this equity. मैंने बताया large cap, mid cap, small cap में कितना होना चाहिए, that which I explained earlier, right? I think stick to that discipline is what I would say. I think कहाँ पे भी आप aggressive मत जाओ, because अभी market ऐसा भी किधर भी कहाँ पे भी आपको एकदम extreme value नहीं मिल रही है. There is no extreme value which you want to go aggressive. There are positives, there are negatives also which are there. So in इस माहौल में अगर आप medium level पे हो, right, then it is better, I think, rather than anything dramatic.
So the last question which we have received, Mr. Patil, is about the again two sectors. It's about the specialty chemical sector and the manufacturing sector.
So specialty chemical has seen a good run in the last 4 years. I think the China Plus One policy, Indian companies have been, I think, it looks to be a long-term story, right? It's only a short in the time, because I think Indian companies are now gaining scale and size, right? And there is still a large opportunity for them to capture. They're still around 4% of the total global market. China is still around 25-30%. So they can continue. They're investing also now. They've got capabilities, also engineering capabilities, which are chemical R&D capabilities which are there. And they're now getting backward integrated also. They were supply chain pe dependent to China pe, but it's backward integrated kar rahe. So they're becoming more mature. They're expensive now. The sector is slightly expensive. That's the only negative, I would say. The stocks काफी महंगे हो गए हैं, तो थोड़ा सा संभल के रहना चाहिए वहाँ पे. But structurally, the sector looks good from a long-term perspective in terms of growth and outlook over there. And वहाँ पे खाली, yeah, one should not get into commodities, chemicals, specialty chemicals. I think that should be fine. So that's on the specialty chemicals. And which was the other sector you said?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing में, again, manufacturing is a very broad sector, right? Yeah. Okay, अब क्या देखते हो manufacturing के अंदर? But I think India manufacturing is now poised for growth because of the government focus on manufacturing. Like defense में जैसे देख रहे हैं, right? India wants to be self-sufficient, and we are now opened up a lot of sector in defense where you want to source locally. PLI schemes, the government announced PLI sectors, and companies are looking at to invest not only create a domestic market but also gain scale and size and export. So manufacturing sector also looks poised for good. One thing you have to be looking at companies with the sector जहाँ पे आपके return on capital you invest कर रहे हो, उसमें these companies are making decent return on capital, right? ROC ना अच्छा ना, तो वो देख के आपको देखना पड़ेगा. But yeah, I think
PLI by the government, the domestic government, is also an add point to the manufacturing sector, don't you think?
Yeah. So I think that sector also looks poised for good growth.
Okay, so there is a question from Mansi said that which is better to invest, gold, mutual fund, or gold? So according to us, that gold mutual fund is a far better way as compared to holding the physical asset. Ms. Mansi, there are certain points which we can discuss. Na, that theft ho gaya, POT ho gaya. So there are multiple more points. Taxation ho gaya. So gold mutual funds are the other best, is the best way to invest in gold asset class. So
Yeah.
guys, if there is any question, then please let us know, or we can close it for the day. Which scheme of Aditya Birla? There is one query. Which scheme of can you please read it out, Shreya?
Yes, sir. Which scheme of ABSL gives 12% to 15% to the investor?
See, ऐसा तो see, I mean, if you look at long-term return, most of our funds would have done that, right? Now it all depends on the market, right? The market, and see, mutual fund, our endeavor is to beat the benchmark by a reasonable margin, right? Say, I mean, in the past, there was a long margin, the beating the benchmark, there was a large differential, but I think we target say around, if we beat the benchmark by around a couple of percentage points, good outcome, right? So I think depending on the risk profile, आपको देखना चाहिए, okay, this thing which will give, but by and large, I think if you look at a flexi cap fund, right, over a longer term, the market return is around, I think we expect from here over the next year, market should give around 10 to 12% return, right? Or mutual fund 1% ज़्यादा return दे सकता है, so that if we manage it well, right? So yeah, so I think yeah, again, it all depends on the underlying market. So I don't want to make any kind of a forward-looking statement over here, but you can look at historical returns of the funds which are there. That will give you some indication, right? What returns you can expect going forward.
So there is a question from Mansi said that previously she was asking which is better, gold mutual fund or gold. She is asking, does it help in tax saving?
See, for tax saving, let me answer Mr. Patil for this.
Yeah.
See, for tax saving, ELSS is the option in mutual fund space only. So that's the only option. I have already replied in the chat box. So there is one question, Mr. Patil, about what are target funds in India. So I think Venkata Sairam has asked this question. I request to him that if he can elaborate his question further.
What he said, he asked about target fund.
Yes.
See, I think what he's referring is to there are the fixed income, right? There are these target maturity funds which I talked about.
No, he only mentioned about what are target funds in India.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
So I think we can close the session now, Shreya. Thank you, Mr. Patil. Thanks for giving us such a good insight about the market and the outlook. I am very much sure that it's a great help for our partners and clients. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Mahesh Patil for joining and sharing his wonderful thought with us and our audience too, and giving us valuable time. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahesh. I would also like to thank Mr. Anand Sharma for connecting with us and making this session interactive. It's truly our pleasure to have you both with us. This is all for today's event. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the session. Thank you. The recording for the session will be shared with you all soon.